friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the chapter Conundrum. And in today's video, I have a tag for you guys. It's the Booktuber Name Tag. So this tag was originally created by Aaron Read a Book, and I was tagged to do this by Monty Adkins. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave both of their videos down below in the description for you guys to check out. But the way this tag works is each prompt is based off of a booktuber name, and the original creator, Aaron, chose some of his favorite booktubers to base prompts off of. I thought this was a fun idea, and without further ado, let's jump into it. So prompt 1 is books I'm not reading, a book that's been on your TBR forever. And for this, I am going to pick The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Guys, this is one that I still have not gotten to. I have had this on my goal or plan to read this every year since like 2021, and I still haven't gotten there. And part of my issue was that I knew I had to finish a few other Sanderson things before diving into this, but I since have finished those and I still haven't picked this up. And I think the main thing is it's chunky, so I know I have to dedicate a lot of time to it, and I just have so many other buddy reads and read-alongs that I'm interested in doing, and so many series I'm already in the middle of that I need to continue on with before I forget things, that I just haven't found time to slot this in yet. But now that Wind and Truth is going to be coming out in December this year, and the first arc of the series is going to be finished, it will probably be more of a higher priority for me next year. I think it just depends how many of my currently ongoing series I finally managed to wrap up this year. Prompt 2 is novel iDeea, and that's a book that has an interesting premise or that uses a unique plot device. And for this, I'm going to talk to you about The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson, the first book in the Revenant Chronicles. So this was a young adult fantasy that was really popular back in the day, but still to this day, I remember thinking that the premise of this was really intriguing. So this book follows a princess who decides to run away, and the reason she's running away is that her parents and family are trying to force her into an arranged marriage with someone she's never met. And she escapes successfully, but then is tailed by two men, and one is the prince she spurned, and the other is an assassin sent to kill her. But neither she nor you as the reader have any idea which one is which. They both catch up with her, and it's a lot of fun trying to deduce who is who. Prompt 3 is Revenant Reads, and that's a book where someone has returned from the dead. And I definitely have some examples of this, but a lot of them were spoilery. So I had to think a little bit more like horror to avoid spoilers for this. But I ended up deciding to go with The Patience of a Dead Man by Michael C. Clarke. And this is the first in an indie horror trilogy. And it follows a recently divorced man, Tim, who decides to take his life savings and put it into this real fixer-upper of a place in rural New Hampshire. And then as he's fixing this place up, he realizes that it's actually haunted and there are a couple ghosts around. But the problem is his whole life savings are sunk into this place, and he basically decides, I have to stick with this and finish it and try and sell it in order to not be bankrupt. So he teams up with his realtor and they start researching the history of the place. And what they find out is very intriguing, but mainly what he encounters while he's trying to do some renovations is pretty spooky, especially since he has some visitation with his kids, and his kids come stay at the place for the weekend a few times. The joy of this series is really digging into the ghost's backstory and finding out so many more details. And book 2 in the series opens with her backstory, which was very interesting to read. The next prompt is CriminOlly, a book where a crime takes place. And for this, I'm going to talk to you guys about one of my all-time favorite thrillers, The Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena. And in this book, there is a couple who's invited to a dinner party next door, and their babysitter cancels on them last minute. So they decide, okay, well, we're just next door and the baby's napping. Why don't we just take the baby monitor and one of us will pop back every 10-15 minutes to check on her and make sure she's still good. You know, I'll come back for her feeding, whatever. But at the end of the evening, they get home and realize that their baby has been kidnapped. And this story largely follows the police investigation that ensues afterwards. Prompt 5 is A Book Time with Elvis, a book about time, time travel, or someone named Elvis. And I don't think I have anything that comes to mind with an Elvis, but I definitely read a lot of sci-fi that has time travel or that plays with time. However, I'm going to think a little bit outside the box and recommend Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a contemporary romance set in multiple timelines. And this follows a character who basically feels kind of lost in life. They don't really know what their future dreams or goals are or where they're going. And one night she's going out with a friend to celebrate, and something happens on the night of this get together with some friends where they decide to separate ways at the end of the evening. And suddenly she finds herself in two timelines, one where she leaves with one friend and one where she leaves with the other. This was an interesting read in a concept I hadn't really seen used in romance before. I would definitely recommend it. Just make sure you have some cinnamon rolls on hand before diving into this one, because this book is going to make you crave them. They are the main character's favorite, and they are brought up a lot. I think when I was reading this, I had to stop reading, look up a recipe online, and make some cinnamon rolls homemade because the cravings were real. And thankfully, not only did my cinnamon rolls turn out well, but I really enjoyed this book as well. Prompt 6 is middle of the book March, and this is your favorite book that you read in March. So I'm going to base this on just March of 2024. I'm not sure if it's supposed to encompass every March or just the most recent one, but I'm going to go for the most recent. And my favorite of March this past year was The Broken Eye, which is the third Lightbringer book by Brent Weeks. And for me, this one was the peak of the series. So obviously I'm not going to tell you what this one is about or who it follows, because I don't want to spoil who's still around, who's not, or what's happening this far into the series. But I will say that this is the book in the series where I was probably the most invested in the story. There had been so much foreshadowing about things that were possibly coming layered into books 1 and 2, and this one really delivered on some answers and reveals for things that I had been guessing at. So I found it really satisfying that way. But I also thought that Brent Weeks really improved on his action writing with this book, and I was just more pulled into the story. The next prompt is Book Buds, a book with a great friendship. And for this, I'm going to go with Theft of Swords, which is the first book in the Rhaenyra Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. And this is actually now a bind-up of two books that used to be indie published, The Crown Conspiracy and Abhampartha. But anyways, the main character duo in this series, Royce and Hadrian, is fantastic. The banter is top-notch, and they're just really funny to read about. Royce is a skilled thief, and Hadrian is a mercenary, but the way that their personalities either clash or balance each other out is really funny at times. And these two just have a great relationship, great dialogue, and they're always full of shenanigans. So they're very fun to read about. I would highly recommend checking out this series if you haven't already. And also, side note, this is narrated by one of my all-time favorite audiobook narrators, Tim Gerard Reynolds. So if you do want to pick it up, I would also recommend going audio for it. The next prompt is Obscure Book Adventures, and this is for a book you love that never gets talked about. And I'm going to go with Escape by Ian Rob Wright. And this is a self-pub horror. And essentially it follows a girl who's kind of new to a workplace, and she's kind of looking to get to know her coworkers a little bit better. So she agrees to go on a company outing to an escape room. But obviously this is horror, and things go very wrong for them in this escape room. And let's just say that she definitely gets to know her coworkers a lot more than she bargained for. A lot of people's dirty laundry comes to light, and this is just a really fun read. It's paced excellently. And this is also the only book I've read set in an escape room where you feel like you get to kind of join in on figuring out the puzzles and solutions. So I enjoyed it for that reason as well. The next prompt is Savage Reads, and this is to talk about a book that either features a monster or beast, or a human acting monstrously or beastly. And as a fantasy reader, this was tough because there are so many things I could have picked. But I wanted to go with something that was probably underhyped, where you may not know that it features some monsters or beasts. And that is 12 Kings in Sherikai, the first Shattered Sands novel by Bradley P. Bolio. And this is a Middle Eastern desert setting fantasy that follows a young girl, Cheda, and she is basically on a revenge mission against the rulers of her city because they're not the greatest people. But in this world, you have some beasts called the Asiram, and these are creatures that come out every holy night or every Bet Zaire, which I think falls either like every month or every couple weeks. But in any event, on this night, the Asiram come out to prowl, and they basically cull the population a little bit. They are sent on a mission to kill certain people in the city, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, someone goes around and marks doorways of the targets so it's tense that way. But one night on Bet's Ear, Cheta is stuck outside and encounters them and sees a lot more than she bargained for. There are also some other really unique monsters and creatures in further books in this series, but those are the ones that kind of get your attention very early on. And the final prompt of this tag is a book that fits your own channel name or the name of a channel you love if you can't come up with something for your own name. And me being the chapter conundrum, I thought, oh, I can definitely come up with something fitting for that. So actually one of my all-time favorite books has no chapters, which I'm gonna call a conundrum because you never know when to stop reading and it's too long to do in one sitting for most people. So I would say that's a bit of a conundrum. And that, of course, is going to be Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. And of all the King books I've read, this is by far my favorite. So this follows Dolores Claiborne, a middle-aged woman who is in police custody, accused of killing an elderly lady that she works for. She was her caretaker. And a lot of people suspect her because her husband disappeared under suspicious circumstances years and years ago. But the reason this book is so great is that the main character, Dolores, has really great humor and really funny reactions. She says a lot of things that the reader would be thinking as they're reading, and it's just a great time overall to read about her experiences. I also thought this was one of King's better paced novels. I've read, I don't know, probably like 15, 16 King books at this point, and this is definitely one of the faster moving ones. If you do decide you want to give this a go, I would also highly recommend the audiobook. I think the audiobook does break it up into sections, so it does give you stopping points that way, but also just the narrator does a great job. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and tag a few other people. So first off, I want to tag Trin from Portable Magic. Next up, I want to tag Robin from Only the Best Fantasy Novels. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and tag my husband Jake at The Bookish Drummer. And the reason I chose these three people specifically to tag is because I'm very curious to see what they come up with for the last question, the book that relates to their channel name. I feel like all of those names will relate to a book I'm either interested in or where we just all really like their answers. So that was it for the Booktuber name tag. Let me know what you thought of my answers down below, what you would answer if you were doing this tag. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on the way out if you want to. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.